Hello and welcome to the TGH College Hardwood Podcast. I am Joe. With me is Greg, as always, here to recap what happened in college basketball week 2, preview what's going to happen in college basketball week 3, otherwise known as Feast Week. First of all, Greg, how you doing?
I said on the first episode, this is you just gotta get to this week, and this is when the fun really starts. Of course, March is where everything we look for in a season, but this week is where the real kind of kickoff of the season. We got a few morsels the last couple of weeks, but this week you're gonna get some really nice matchups, a couple of tournaments that hopefully will produce some both interesting results and some just overall good quality basketball games. So it's hard not to like this week. Maybe have a couple of days off work just to, depending on what your schedule looks like. Obviously, this is what you do for a living, so you know. Yeah, this is like almost Christmas, I guess. I don't know.
People have been playing Christmas music all month long, so we're already there. It
Yeah,
feels like.
my wife already put up the trees, so she doesn't like to put them up for like 2 weeks and then take them down. So I was like, okay, that's fine. Fair enough.
I think you can do, but I think people can not gloss over Thanksgiving or the good football and college basketball that comes with it, and still celebrate Christmas or get ready for Christmas. I think it's fun, and then take the tree down sometime in the new year, and you're all good. But we do have some great games to talk about, recap, and then also preview. So let's start it off. We have the champion.
Actually,
Oh,
we have something much more important that's long overdue. We're on episode 4, and someone still has not been introduced yet.
oh, let's go. Let's do it.
So we've already met everyone's dog but my dog. We met my brother-in-law Cameron's dog, but we've not met Luna. Joe knows I have a voice that I do for her, so I won't do that now because I don't want to ruin your ears. Thank you for the kisses. This is Luna. She's 3-year-old golden noodle. She's been present for a few other episodes, but has not been as loud as Marley or Rondo. But this is her official introduction to the podcast. My wife may get home at some point while we're podcast. You never give me kisses, and of course, right now you want to give them to me. This is on camera, right? So I can show this to Rachel later that
Yeah, yeah.
our dog actually loves me. All right, cool. So at some point, my wife's probably going to get home, and you'll hear the dog muscling about, going out, and being excited that the true favorite is home. But as you could, for those of you that are listening on pod and not watching the YouTube, my dog was just giving me kisses, which I usually have to beg her to do. But I mean, Joe, you saw it firsthand. She does at least somewhat like me, I guess.
Yeah, definitely. And we'll have Rondo and Luna's picks for the bracket when we get around to that point. There's obviously different ways you
Absolutely.
can get dogs to pick things. And if you're talking while your wife gets home, we're kind of screwed. But if I'm talking, I'll just try to mute you for a couple seconds, and we'll keep on going. But hey, that's what we get. We're a self-run show. That's what we do. Excited to have Luna and Rondo along for the ride. You might hear Rondo at any point anyway because he barks all the time. But we'll get to the Champions Classic here first, Greg. We had Duke and Michigan State to start this event. Now, to me, this kind of lost some of its luster because Duke lost to Arizona. Michigan State already lost to James Madison, and that's another reason why I personally think that the Champions Classic should be opening up the season for these teams. It gives a good barometer of where these teams may be. And this would be, in my opinion, Greg, the more sloppy of the two games, the one where I think the issues with these teams were way more apparent. Now, Duke ended up getting the win in this one, but I would say there's a lot of, in ways that I would say there's more things to be concerned about than impressed about. And these are two very good teams who could figure it out and be contenders in March, but right now they have a lot of things to figure out. So what did you take from this game?
Well, for looking, we kind of already talked about some of these points when we talked about Duke, Arizona, but we were a little worried about, is it just going to be Filipowski? And what we did see, and I don't know if we're going to see Duke kind of be one of those teams where a different guy steps up every night or something to be that kind of second-hand man to Filipowski. What we did see was 18 points from Caleb Foster, 4 of 5 from the and Joe, I didn't even think about this. We saw another freshman go 4 or 5 from the 3-point line, but we'll talk about that a little later. Caleb Foster, 4-5, 18 points. That's the kind of production they need. They can't just have it be all Filipowski. If you're looking at the scoring, it was actually a little more spread out than I even remembered it. 13 from Proctor, 13 from Mitchell, 15 from Filipowski, and most importantly, Foster giving them 18 off the bench. That's good production off the bench. But that, I think Caleb Foster was kind of that, maybe that nice little piece that we said, okay, maybe this team can put something together if you know. I don't know if that just came through. Something just came through, so I'll just ignore that. I just want to make sure there's not an audio issue or something.
No, you're all good.
Okay. So that for me was the biggest point for Duke. For Michigan State, it was a lot of the same stuff. Tyson Walker doing most of these things. Malik Hall had a decent game, you know, not bad from him. We're still seeing that Michigan State front court is just not helping them at all. So Joe, I mean, Sissoko's there and he's fine, but what are they? We're going to give Tom Izzo the benefit of the doubt. We think he's going to figure it out. I think we saw later in the week Xavier Booker maybe played a little bit more. They had another game later in the week. Joe, what did you take away from this game?
First of all, same point as you. Foster is going to be that guy. If they're going to have a second guy step up, it's going to be him. It's good to have someone like Roach who's experienced and can kind of settle things down as a two guard, point guard, whatever you want to call him at different times that he plays. But I do think Foster can be the guy who can score from the perimeter, make it more of a two-man game for Duke rather than just one and then a bunch of people just chipping in. That just doesn't always seem to work. Also, I would say something I took away too is I'm not sure Michigan State's good enough to win it all this year. They're ranked really highly preseason. We talk about with a lot of these teams, you know, especially Kentucky the last couple of years, not having guards that are good enough. And I will trust Izzo, but last year they were a 7 seed. Everyone got hyped about them, bringing everyone back. Tyson Walker is, a fifth-year guy, transferred in from Northeastern, I believe, and he is their best player. He's the only one who looks like he can do anything consistently offensively, shot creation for himself, catch and shoot, whatever it might be. Their shooting from the outside has been very poor to start the year that we've noted. It just doesn't seem like it's a good team overall. And the front court is an issue that you mentioned. Do you play Sissoko? Do you not play Sissoko? Do you play Booker more? Do you not play Booker? A lot of Booker's weaknesses are things that I think, Izzo may not like in terms of maybe not being physically tough or, strong enough for the Big Ten, especially when you get into that part of the season. So there's a lot of good individual pieces on this team. I'm just not sure they have the top end guards to really compete in March. That's why I took away. I mean, there's still plenty of time. Izzo will figure it out if anyone can figure it out. But we're not talking about guys like Tyson Walker winning their team's championships. He's a very solid player, very good player, I'd even say. But I feel like you need if your top offensive player is Tyson Walker, is that good enough? Do you think that's good enough, Greg? Do they need someone else to emerge? Is there anyone on the roster who could emerge? Because I don't think AJ Hoggard is quite that good either, especially in the way of creating shots for himself in a way that you need to in college basketball.
I would agree with what you said. This team, I was high on this team coming into the preseason. Could see them definitely as a top 10, top 5 team, but they've taken that step down kind of to a second tier kind of team, third tier. We don't know. We haven't broken any of that out, but they're definitely not on that first tier of teams that were like, yes, these 5 to 7 teams can definitely win the national championship. Remember, you already mentioned they came in as a 7 seed last year. A lot of this hype was based on what they're bringing back, but also what they're bringing in. What kind of production have they got from the guys that they've brought in this year? Almost nothing. I mean, Cullen Carr's had a nice dunk here or there, which that was kind of what his things were. It was highlights. His McDonald's All-American game dunk was ridiculous. Jeremy Fears barely plays. Xavier Booker. I mean, a lot of it was yes, they're bringing this stuff back, but we're projecting with what they're also bringing in, and they've got nothing so far from those guys, especially in this game. Just looking at the box score, Booker barely even played. Fears had a bucket, Cullen Carr had a bucket, and that's it from their new guys. So other than that, it's basically in this game, it's basically last year's team, which was a 7 seed. Of course, these guys can grow, but I'm with you. If Tyson Walker is your A, you probably got to have a good, 1A or someone to go hand in hand with him. And it seems like they don't have that. If you're going to have, I'm with you. Tyson Walker is not National Player of the Year category, right? Mm-hmm. So if you're going to have a guy like that be your star player, you probably need your second and third options to be nearly as good as him. And I just don't depend. I wouldn't depend on anyone else on that roster for 15 a night. If you're making me place bets, that's not where I'd go with. Literally, I mean, those guys can each do it, a couple nights in a season. Those guys are not Malik Call, Akins, Hogard, and at least not what we've seen so far this season. They're not guaranteed double-digit production guys every night, and you need something like that. You need something consistent. Tyson Walker is going to get his own, but I agree with you. What we're seeing right now is just not enough for this team to be a national championship contender.
Yeah, I will point out there, like I said, there's parts of the team I like. Cohen Carr is one of my favorite freshmen to watch this year. I think he could be, especially with Izzo coaching him, one of the best glue guys. And he's athletic enough where if he went somewhere else, he wouldn't have to be a glue guy, but he can play solid defense. Now there's mental parts of defense with rotations and help that he doesn't always get right, but he can protect the rim. He's athletic. He can produce steals. You can obviously get those dunks that you talked about. I like him. I think it's a good piece for a possible contending team. And Hall as well. Hall is just a versatile kind of big guy that you can do a couple different things, play in the paint, play outside, and that's nice. You just, this game is about guards, and they need to figure that out. I'm not sure they'll be able to, but I think this might come down to is Michigan State figures it out in Big Ten play, and they kind of, hey, they're a 3 or 4 seed. They're a trendy pick by everyone in their brackets because everyone loves talking about Izzo in March. And after all that, I think they could lose in the first round. We've seen some of these big upsets the last couple of years because they go 1 of 22 from 3. Tyson Walker has a bad game, and that's just how it goes. So I'm scared of Michigan State personally. I'm sure that even I will have my brain turned around and think they're good by the time March comes around because of Tom Izzo. But this is a mental note to me and any listener that maybe pick someone to upset Michigan State this year the way they shoot. There's definitely a 3-point discrepancy that could happen against some of these teams that are lower seeds. Let's get to the second game, Greg. We have Kansas and Kentucky. This is one of the more fun basketball games I think I've watched in a long time. As a Kentucky fan, or even as a college basketball fan, I kind of think of last year's Maui Invitational had some good games. Maybe since then, outside of March Madness, obviously, and conference tournaments. But very good game. Kansas wins this one 89-84. Kentucky started the game poorly. After the first 4 minutes, they were down. They then went on a huge run for most of the game, and then the last 4 minutes, they kind of gave it up. So there's a lot of work to be done with this young team, but I would say there's a lot to like about both teams in this one. I'll start it off by saying, Reed Shepherd is very, very good. Rob Dillingham, very, very good. A lot of fun to watch, too, because he has no conscience when he shoots. He just throws anything up there. They'll have to use the bench a little bit. Hey, if you take 2 dumb shots in a row, maybe you see the bench. But Kentucky, too, plays very well without their 3 best players, freshmen, even doing anything. DJ Wagner had a rough game. Justin Edwards had a rough game. Aaron Bradshaw is on the bench with an injury and should be coming back relatively soon. But either way, to go up against a veteran team in Kansas that looks like they could be a national title contender, that's awesome. And then for Kansas, Greg, Hunter Dickinson's a beast. He's going to change things. It seemed like DeJuan Harris took a step forward with his 3-point shooting and his assertiveness. Kentucky made DeJuan Harris beat them. He did beat them, not by himself, obviously, but he hit some big shots to give him the win. I walked away from this game being impressed with both teams, and they have both moved up on a couple different sports books as being the 2 betting favorites to win the national championship. And I can't say that either of those things are wrong. I think both those teams deserve to be up there after what we've seen in just a short period of time.
Yeah, Joe, I was going to say, I don't think I've ever seen this before, but there was actually 2 winners in this game. I don't know that that's ever happened in American sports. I think the great Ted Lasso said that would be like the sign of the apocalypse, but both teams were winners in this game. Sure. In name, I picked Kansas and you picked Kentucky last week, and I'm technically right. But I actually walked away from that game saying to myself, if they were to play that game again tomorrow, I'd have picked Kentucky, especially if they were to play that game again tomorrow. And Aaron Bradshaw, and it just one of the large bodies that Kentucky has that didn't play. Keep in mind, Kentucky did this playing small ball, and sure, that lended them some advantages on the offensive end. And it's not one of those things where you throw in a big guy and you get all that. There's some give and take. If you throw in a big guy, they play a little bit differently. But I don't think Hunter Dickinson's getting 27 and 21 going up against. We haven't seen Aaron Bradshaw play a lick of college basketball unless you watched. Did he even touch the floor in the floor? Okay, so he's been injured. He's been injured for a while. If Hunter Dickinson just has to go up against a sizable body, throw out the window whether Aaron Bradshaw is good at defense or not. He's not getting 21 rebounds in a game if there's a 7-footer boxing him out. He'll probably get 12 to 15. He's Hunter Dickinson. This is what he's done his whole career. He's not going 8 for 12 from the field. He's not. He had a field day because Kentucky played small ball, but that's also why this game ended up 89-84. And as you noted, I texted you when the game started, and I said, what is going on? At the under 16, what is going on with this team? I don't even understand what we're watching. And then all of a sudden, we obviously had the benefit of hindsight. We've seen some more Reed Shepherd games since then. He looks amazing. Rob Dillingham looks amazing. I already said the reference to Caleb Foster going 4 for 5. Rob Dillingham also 4 for 5 from the 3-point line. I'm one of those people. I don't know if you want to mention the other podcast that says this. If you're shooting that well from the 3-point line, you shouldn't be. You should be shooting more until you're at 50% or below. So I get you. He kind of maybe has that heat check kind of vibe to him. But if he's 80% from 3, keep shooting. Keep shooting until you're shooting 40-45%. If you drop down into the 30s, then we'll have a conversation. But if you're making them like that, and that was the other point I wanted to get into. So there's a little bit of a dichotomy with this. We are going to talk. We obviously talked about the interior game that went on here. But if you start taking a look at we already talked about Shepherd and Dillingham. I want to get your comment on Austin Reeves, but you already mentioned DeJuan Harris. DeJuan Harris is not going to win them games. This is you said maybe he took a step forward. I see that as an anomaly. I'm going the other way with that. That is one of the things that made me say I'm worried about this Kansas team, currently ranked number 1 in the country, saying, is that how they're going to win games? Did Omarco Jackson play in this game? That was this guy we heard a lot about. Box score tells me he has 7 points, but where this team outside of their starters, they've got the Michigan State problem. What on earth do they have outside of like Hunter Dickinson and Kevin McCullar, who we have to say had a triple-double. Played, really well, but I came out of this game. Of course, they're a great team, but they don't have quite the same problem Michigan State has because there are dudes on this team, more than one. KJ Adams can just bully his way into the bucket. Kevin McCullar is your monkey wrench, do it all. Hunter Dickinson, we had already talked about off air. He was getting a lot of maybe more high post looks. Be interested to see if he gets more low post looks going throughout the year, but they might be one of those guys getting injured away from all of a sudden you look up and they've taken 3 straight losses. And it's like, well, I walked away being more impressed with Kentucky, and of course Kansas won the game. So, take what you will. So you can respond to that, or I want to know what you think about Austin Reeves taking 17 3-pointers and only making 3 of them, because that is the exact polar opposite of Dillingham and Shepherd, and could be the difference in why I see it. And the thing was, watching the game, it didn't feel like he took that many. It did not feel like that at all, but he did. Yeah. I was floored when I saw that. What do you as you're a resident Kentucky fan? So what are your thoughts on that? You think some of those shots are going to end up going to Dillingham and Shepherd as the year comes on, and maybe once they get their big guys in, of course, they'll have more looks inside too.
Yeah, first of all, you keep on calling him Austin Reeves instead of Antonio. You're thinking of the Lakers guy, but everyone knows who you're talking about. So, no, I think, this is a guy that when he catches the ball and he's open, he shoots. He seems like he has less of a conscience than last year, more in the Rob Dillingham line of thinking than maybe we thought of last year. I'm excited, though, because he was more efficient last year. But having so many guys that can just not have that conscience and can just shoot and get you out of a little bit of a bad time when you're not shooting the ball well, I think is very important. Those shots will fall. He was a very good three-point shooter last year. They needed someone to step up when two of their guys they expected to have big games did not. So I'm happy for that. I liked your point about Marco Jackson. I think I am a little bit. I was not as high on Kansas as other people. I had him at 3 in my preseason poll, so it's not like I was too down on him. I had other teams ahead of him. But I think Marco Jackson started, I mentioned it on the broadcast, started playing basketball at a later age. And when you do that, typically you're not as skilled. So he has athleticism. He needs to keep on developing as a skill player. I mean, we see this with even like NBA guys, right? It took Giannis a couple of years to get going after he picked up basketball late. And you could argue that he's not even the most skilled player. He's just, kind of tall and athletic. He definitely does have skills, don't get me wrong. I'm just saying, like, that's not the basis of his game. So that's an issue. They need to figure that out, and that could come back to bite him in the end. So I agree with your point there. 2 more points I'll make really quickly. I mentioned Kentucky has a new quote-unquote offensive coordinator. That is John Welch. Riley Welch used to be a walk-on for Kentucky. John Welch used to coach in the NBA. It's his father. And he was one of the best assistant coaches in a lot of different places. I know George Karl has spoken highly of him. And he has set things up to have this team take more threes. So to the point about Antonio Reeves missing all those threes, that's not going to happen every game. They're going to find ways to get open threes. This Kentucky team is different. They'll spread the floor out. They have the guards that can get to the basket too, which will open things up more. And yes, when the bigs come back, that'll be something to adjust to. And I think they'll be able to do it pretty well. I still think they have the option. I think the good thing is they have the option to go beat you with small ball like they did against Kansas here. They didn't beat them, but still played well. They have the option to go pound it inside once they get some of these big guys back. They have guards who can get to the basket, and they can also drive and kick. So there's a lot of different ways they can beat you. I'll also say, the last thing I'll say about Kentucky for the show, because we're not picking one of their games later either because they're not doing these events that everyone else does, is a lot of hype about Reed Sheppard and Rob Dillingham. A lot of people down on Justin Edwards and DJ Wagner. I would just say it's 4 games. I'm not sold on this being the end of everything. I think Reed Sheppard has been the best player so far. That doesn't mean it's going to end that way. And there's been obviously talk about national pundits like Jay Williams on a different broadcast for some reason talking about DJ Wagner transferring to Louisville after 4 games because other guys are stepping up and playing better. That's not really responsible, 1. But 2, I think it's why are we getting on these guys after a couple bad games to start their careers? If you look at players in Kentucky's history at the start of a season, not all of them start off so hot. There's a lot of guys who struggled in the Champions Classic, and we'll see these guys come along too. I think it's just a matter of time. So I'll agree with everyone. Everyone's like, oh, Reed Sheppard's Kentucky's best player. He's the best player right now. I'll give you that. But like this 4 games into a season, we could see a totally different team at the end of the year, like we always do with Calipari coach teams. So I remember the first year, the year that Shea Gilgeous-Alexander and what's his name, Quade Green were both at Kentucky. Quade Green started the year at point guard, and then Shea was so good by the middle of the season that swapped. Shea was the point guard and finished out the year and was the high draft pick. Quade ended up transferring to Washington, just like every Kentucky player who ends up transferring seemingly does. So that's my point here. I'm very big on Reed Sheppard. I think he's awesome. I think he's exceeded expectations for all the Kentucky fans, and they're having a great time. But I would not give up on some of these highly ranked recruits just because of a couple rough games so far.
I agree with you, Joe. This team looks dangerous. That is why I think forget the score. Yes, we see Kansas won the game, but Kentucky won the game too. I know it's weird, but I walked away so impressed with that team. And certain analysts not to be named did not have them in their top 25 preseason. We don't name call. It's not nice, but this team's good. They're good. They can ball.
They can, and I think for John Calipari, a lot of pressure on this season, a lot of talk about him and his coaching style, and now he has a team that he likes, but it's a mesh of him having a team he likes, but also spreading the floor out and not just being a team that has clogged paints and everything. It's going to be good. I think it'll be a good season. Maybe not the pressure, if you have such a good regular season, maybe not the pressure of, hey, you have to make a Final Four like people talked about last year. Maybe it's, hey, if you win 30 games this year, maybe you make it to the Sweet 16 and people are just like, wow, that was a good season. I don't know what the bar is. He's not getting fired. He has a lifetime contract, but obviously Kentucky fans are very much, one side or the other with him. All right, so let's move on. We have the Gavitt games to recap, and Purdue beat Xavier. We picked this game because Greg wanted a little laugh, but I don't think Xavier had much of a chance in this one, Greg. They lost by 12, but I mean, Purdue's just a much better team.
Yeah, there's not a lot to say about this one except Xavier, I thought, played better than I was expecting. They more than covered the spread there. It's about all you can ask when you're going up against one of the top five teams in the country. I did like they got some production from young players off the bench. It does seem like there may be a little bit more here to work with than I had previously thought. They might find a way to sneak into the tournament. This is not a team that all of a sudden we're looking at, oh, they got a Soleil boom like they did last year. This is not one of that. I do think there's a few more guys that we're seeing stuff from that I wasn't expecting. They had a little foul trouble later in the week at the Continental Tire main event, but they had a decent showing there too. I Joe, how many games do you think this team wins in the Big East this year? This is what I've been pondering. I do think they're probably like right below average for a Big East team, but that might be good enough to sneak into the tournament. What are you thinking?
Yeah, they're a very tough team because with all the injuries, all the players leaving, you kind of thought, hey, they weren't going to be so good. So I left them out of my preseason bracketology. I'm thinking there's just no way. But the freshmen are better than expected. The foreign players they recruited are better than expected, and the transfers I would say haven't even been over the top good yet. So we'll see if they kind of improve. But they filled roles, right? They've done a decent job. I think they're probably going to finish like fifth or sixth in the Big East, and you're right, that could be good enough to get in. We'll see how the season plays out and how some of these other conferences do. The freshmen, if they keep on developing, this could be a team that ends up getting in the tournament. I don't know, maybe not even a 5 or 6 seed. Maybe it's like a 7 to 10 seed, somewhere in that range. But even so, getting into the tournament with this team would be a heck of a job by Sean Miller. And it could show some growth for next year when they get some of these injured guys back. Some of the freshmen, optimally return. Some of the transfers might have more eligibility. There's a good situation brewing there at Xavier if they just have a solid season this year. And I went from thinking, hey, they might not even make the NIT to they might make the NCAA tournament. It's not going to be easy. They need some of these freshmen to develop, but yeah, I'm with you. I think you look at some of the teams that they might be better at or better than in the Big East. We have Butler. You have DePaul. You have Georgetown, who struggled early. Maybe St. John's. Too early to say that. We'll talk about them, down the road here, but they're definitely in that second, third tier of the Big East, which could be good enough. And then the next thing, Purdue as well for me, Greg. I mean, we kind of knew all about them already. I don't think much has changed, but their guards do look more confident to me this year, and that is huge. Obviously, freshmen last year. I still want to see them play in a big, high leverage situation where they're getting pressured and have to force, or have to show that they don't turn the ball over and hit some shots. But we might be seeing that even as early as right now.
Literally right now. Timestamp this. We are podcasting. It is 6:33 Eastern time, and they are currently down. They're currently up 5 on Gonzaga. This was the only time Joe and I could make work for our schedules, so it's currently 52-47. Looks like with about 10 minutes to go. So we'll have to see. But just to echo what you've already said, I really liked what I saw from the Purdue freshman last year. That's Lawyer, and now I'm going to blank on his name.
Braden Smith.
Smith, yes. I really liked what I saw from them last year, and I know I had said that to you at some point. Man, I really like these freshman guards. They aren't just good, they're great. And then they just hit this wall, and I think it's that grueling Big Ten. So we'll see if they hit kind of a similar wall this year, because the Big Ten's still the Big Ten. Obviously, yes, they have another year of experience, but we'll see how they to me, they look like they're playing how they kind of started last year, playing pretty efficiently, seem like leaders of the team, there to, enter the ball into the post with Zach Edey, and also they can make those. They can both make some shots. They can both drive. I like what I see from them. It's just be a question of how long can they keep up this level of play. It was the same question we had last year. So nothing's changed for me with that team, just like you said.
Absolutely. One of the title contenders. We'll see if they can get it done for the Big Ten. As we talked about earlier, Michigan State maybe not going to help them with a Big Ten team winning the title. Another Gavitt game we have to go over, Wisconsin and Providence. Providence wins this one. We had kind of mentioned that we liked Wisconsin, Greg, in this game. There's a lot to like about this team just from a standpoint of they got everyone back from last year. They added A.J. Storr, and just that maybe opens up the offense a little bit. Providence, though, new head coach, Kim English and everything, they have things, pretty much figured out because Bryce Hopkins and Devin Carter came back. And when you have those two guys, at least to start your roster, you can build around them and get some good players. It seems like maybe Wisconsin is having issues with Connor Essegian's back injury and possibly trying to figure out what's going on. I believe in the last couple games he played like 7 minutes in one of them too. Like, it's not a finished Wisconsin team, so I'm not like panicking or anything here. I still like that team, but I think Providence is maybe a little better than I thought.
Yeah, and just to kind of go back and talk about, you already talked about the Essegian. I wanted to touch on AJ Storr. I know when we talked, we both liked this team just looking at their overall roster, and I can't remember if you said you did or not, but I got a chance to watch that Tennessee-Wisconsin scrimmage, and I really liked what I saw from them. But I had commented that AJ Storr he looked off. I wasn't sure what it was. This game, yes, they lost. 22 points from him, 7 for 17 from the field, 2 for 6 from 3. Looks like, okay, maybe he's got that kind of figured out. It was the rest of the cast that just had an off night for them. I did not see this result coming in. I could have seen Providence winning the game. I did not see them. The final score 72-59. I don't think it was really at any point even close. So, yeah, I mean, maybe this Providence team is one we both kind of overlooked. I know we talked about Bryce Hopkins himself being good. It seems like Devin Carter's really having himself a year so far. That team's going to be one to watch. And maybe it's just because Kim English got to talk to a lot of these guys and keep them around. It's good for him that Bryce Hopkins and Devin Carter didn't transfer anywhere when Cooley left. But I did not see this result coming in, and I guess that's college basketball for you. We're sitting here talking because if you already knew what was going to happen, why would we be talking? Mm-hmm. But this was one that I'm still liking Wisconsin as a tournament team. I'm with you. I'm not panicking. It just seems like AJ Storr had a night and the rest of them had an off night, and I can't even remember. Have they played since then?
Wisconsin.
Yeah. They play right now. They do have. This is I don't think I have this on our. We can just briefly touch on this. They do have a game. Are they playing right now?
They're playing Virginia right now.
They're playing Virginia right now.
But they had a game in between, I believe.
They played Robert Morris. So
okay.
They are playing Virginia right now, and they are up on Virginia, who just this week got added to the AP poll. So I think enough for us to say, all right, this team might go through some growing pains, some ebbs and flows. We'll check on that Connor Essegian injury, see how that goes. I know you and I kind of talked about him last year a little bit, but yeah, I think there's a makings of a decent, maybe top 30 team there. So.
Absolutely. We'll move on to the next game of the Gavitt games. We had Marquette and Illinois. Greg, you picked this one right. I picked it wrong. I was high on Illinois being at home, and Terrence Shannon and Tyler Kolek had an ankle injury that he was questionable for. He ended up playing, and he played well. Obviously, a player who's not built off of a bunch of athletic ability. He just really understands the offense, how to use his body to get to the basket, how to find his teammates. And he had a heck of a game for a guy with an ankle injury, 24 points and 6 rebounds. Illinois didn't have too bad of a game. Again, not overly concerned. They've already showed that they can beat Kansas, even though it was a secret scrimmage that they televised and all that BS that they always do. But they've shown they can beat good teams. For Marquette, I think it may be a team that solidifies where they're ranked more than anything. We obviously saw last year they ended up getting the 2 seed, right? But the narrative that I've even put out there before is that they don't do anything in March, or at least Shaka Smart teams don't do anything in March other than that one VCU run. I think I'm getting closer to buying in to maybe thinking, hey, they can make a little run here. They have plenty of returning talent. Kolek and Jones are a very good backcourt. It seems like they have the makings of a pretty good team this year for sure.
I agree with you. I do want to touch a little bit on the Illinois side. We know what they have in Terrence Shannon, but there was one player that I believe missed a good chunk of last year. Luke Goody comes in 4 for 7 from 3. We like to see that. Marcus Damask, transfer from, I have it here, Southern Illinois, comes in, gives them 18. There's something there. I'm with you. I think this team is definitely, I don't know what we think, top 20 for sure, a top 25 team. They lost to Marquette. We're not gonna give you any scratches, any marks on your report card for that. I would like to see someone else step up. Is it gonna be Goody consistently? Nice to see him come in off the bench, give him some production. I was surprised. I had never seen Marcus Damask play a game. I don't know about you. I wasn't watching a lot of Southern Illinois basketball last year. Good for that. So we'll just see if that bench production is going to keep coming from Goody or where they're going to get that kind of third scorer. Marquette, that team's they're fun. They love to run. That's the only thing I kept writing down. Man, this team they love to run. They love to get out in transition. Tyler Kolek in the open floor is fun to watch. The one thing that we kind of heard is we're just going to take David Joplin and he's going to be the inserted fifth starter for Omax Prosper, who went to the NBA. Definitely think he's a step down. I don't think this is just as much of a plug and play. This team is right back in the Final Four, Sweet 16 type conversation. We'll keep an eye on that. They obviously are returning 4 out of 5 starters from a really good team last year, but maybe they did lose just a little bit. Obviously, when you lose any NBA talent, you're going to lose a little bit. But I kind of heard Joplin's going to be this. Yeah, he's just going to step right in, and we're not even going to lose stride. Obviously, they won the game, but we're here to talk about, okay, what besides the final score, what are we seeing? And I don't know if they're going to get, they got 24 from Kolek, 15 from Jones. 13 from, I always want to call him Igo Hardo, but it's Iguodaro. I promise you, Joe, every time I saw his name before I heard it pronounced, I thought it was Igo Hardo. I promise you. Because, I thought he was a paint guy. So he goes, so. But I love watching this team. They're a lot of fun.
I think they are too. And again, I hope that maybe they can get over the hump in March and get to the second weekend. We'll see how the matchup ends up being. We'll see if they can stay healthy. Obviously, Kolek playing early in the season, something I may have held him out for this game. Just ankles, you never want to mess with those. But they get the win on the road, and as you said, Illinois got some talent to work with too, and we're going to see how they do in that Big Ten. The next Gavitt game we have to go over, Creighton beats Iowa. Greg, I don't have too much about this game. I did watch this, not live, but I ended up going back and watching it. Trey Alexander had a huge game. He's really filling a role of being a scorer, but also a creator, as they lost their point guard last year. Yes, they got a transfer in Ashworth, but it's good to have multiple guys who can run the offense. Creighton certainly looks like they could be a title contender, a team that could win the Big East. And Iowa, while they battled tough and played better than I expected, I don't think this is a team that's really going to the tournament or anything this year.
I just keep thinking, and I know you already mentioned it, Ashworth stepping in for Nemhard. I just keep thinking, man, it is a crying shame that we don't get to see another year of Nemhard running the point at Creighton. Obviously, he's on the bigger or better things, however you want to call it. But Trey Alexander seems like he stepped his game up. Definitely coming along, looking like a star in the sport. Baylor Shireman, we know what that team is. Obviously, outside of losing their point guard from last year, I that is the one thing that makes me wonder is if they still had Nemhard, would we be talking about this team as automatic national championship contender, top 4 team? And they're obviously top 10, top 15 team. I just wonder if Stephen Ashworth is a good player. Utah State, Joe knows I'm a Mountain West fan. I got to see him play quite a bit last year. probably watched 4 or 5 of his games, but you do wonder. It does look like, just looking for the box score, they got more bench production than I realized. There might be something there. I just wonder if they're not going to have that. No points from Ashworth in the game, only 3 assists. Just wonder. They're going to be. Is that going to be the missing piece? The one that went out to the West Coast. So, any other thoughts?
I got nothing on that game, and just one game left that we're going to review from the Gavitt games. We have Maryland and Villanova, two teams that had started off the year very underwhelming, we'll say. Underwhelming is the word we're going to use. Villanova wins this one. They have also lost to Penn this year, and Maryland has just had a heap of trouble this season. A lot of people were high on them. A couple good players, just maybe not the right fit right now. Jameer Young, a guy that I think I had preseason All-American third team. He's been gotten a lot of accolades. They just can't figure it out. Villanova, big win for Kyle Neptune. It was getting pretty scary on some pretty funny tweets on Twitter about Kyle Neptune's job and some people who were donating money to the school. It's a very funny thing going on there. Ultimately, though, these two teams have a lot of work to do to kind of get back in the good graces of people who are watching and trying to analyze them.
Although, Joe, I don't even know if after what we've seen from Maryland, I don't even know if we want to call this a big win for Villanova. They've got an MTE coming up that we're going to talk about in a little bit. One of the I would say top 3 most famous ones. They'll be a battle for Atlantis. I mean, this was a good win, but they obviously die. All you can ask them to do is play the teams that are on their schedule. They played Maryland. It's unfortunate that, of course, they were supposed to be something that they're not right now, but I don't know about you, Joe. How much of this game did you watch? Because it got pretty. I sat down. I was looking forward to this game. I said, man, this looks like it's going to be a good one. I think I even said on our last episode, Maryland's got to get something going because they were, supposed to be this. I want to say they were picked 3rd or 4th in the Big Ten, and that's not there right now. They still have a lot of the same pieces from last year, but they're not the same team. I don't know what's different. I can't pick it out.
I don't know either. I know they will likely figure it out at some point. I think coaching will be a big factor and getting it figured out. But they also have the players too, right? Maybe it doesn't fit right now, but hopefully it gets figured out. I too was excited for this game. Lost some of the luster. We'll knock out one of the other notable results we're going to talk about is Villanova Penn. I already mentioned it. This is not a team. As much as I like Ivy League and Ivy League basketball and their 4-team tournament, and I talked about Yale in our opening show, and last year I bet some money on Cornell a lot of times because I really liked Cornell last year. This is not a team you lose to if you're at Villanova. This is 2 years removed from Jay Wright. You still have a lot of players who are built in the system. You can't lose that game. I know it's quote unquote a city rivalry. It's not a rivalry. Villanova should dominate this. I do think this says a lot about Kyle Neptune. I do think it says something about the direction of the Villanova program. And it could be even a bigger theme about some of these private schools not having the NIL money available to them that some of the other public schools, bigger public schools, maybe do have. So that's just kind of something, food for thought moving forward. All right, those are the Gavitt games. We're going to move on to some events that were going on last week and have finished up, or I think we have one that's finishing up tonight, but we'll recap what's happened so far. Charleston Classic, Houston wins this one. We both picked Houston to win this one, the clear best team in the field. But Greg, I was surprised. I thought Houston was tier 1. Tier 2 was Dayton and Utah, two teams that, are they going to make the tournament? Are they not? Found out a lot about them. And then tier 3 was everyone else, which was surprising. I know, LSU, we had talked about losing to Nichols, St. John's, Rick Pitino, but lost to Michigan. What were they going to do? Wake Forest, I know you'd mentioned them too. They don't look like they've been very good this year. Actually, they lost to LSU the other day in one of the consolation games. But it was to me, very clear what the tiers of this tournament were coming out of it. And it wasn't necessarily that clear going in other than Houston was the best.
Just a quick note on Wake Forest. I know we touched on this. I can't remember if it's the last episode. I believe it was last episode when we brought up this and we're picking this MTE. Tamari Monsanto is not playing. He's still recovering from an injury. I don't think we clarified this on pod. He's still recovering from an injury that he had last year. So that is why he's not currently playing. I still haven't seen anything about when exactly they're expecting him to play. So that Wake Forest team is still not complete. I do keep looking at box scores, seeing Hunter Salas having some nice games. I do wonder if that's going to be one of those teams because again, this was a team that I thought if you want a dark horse pick, if you want to put some money on until I realized Demario Monsanto wasn't playing. This is a team you might want to look at in a couple weeks, maybe come conference time, that might seemingly out of nowhere turn it on, and it's because they're getting a very important player back. So just something to keep an eye on out there. The thing I was most impressed with, so Dayton's big thing, and obviously my wife's a Dayton grad, so we got to talk about Dayton. But when Malachi Smith went down, for those of you who don't know, Scoochie Smith's younger brother, Scoochie is an absolute Dayton legend. When Malachi Smith went down, he has unfortunately had some injury issues. I sent the text. I said, this team is done. They're just forget it. They have no tournament aspirations anymore. And Javon Bennett, transfer out of Merrimack, has definitely played a lot. But I mean, I just look at the guy and said, man, that sometimes, and I know it's hard to do this because you don't want to boil everything down to size, but he just does not look like your obviously they're not power conference, but he just doesn't have that. He doesn't pass the airport test. That guy walks through the airport and you say, hey, he's a basketball player. But he's played a lot better. I mean, his shot selection is interesting. He's played a lot better than I expected. Nate Santos is the name you need to know. That is the name you need to know. I know it's hard because you transfer out of Pitt. It's hard because obviously I have a personal connection to this team, but he may be one of the hottest players in the country right now. Joe, I don't know how much Dayton basketball you've got a chance to watch. Obviously, I'm sure I've gotten a chance, but he's putting up against a torrential Houston defense. He's still getting good looks, and that I mean that was what impressed me most. If we're not talking about the Houston defense, of course, which was suffocating. Mm-hmm. I mean, this game was this. Yes, it got close at times, but there was never a time in my head when I was watching this with my wife and whatnot. This was the championship game. There was never a time in my head where I said Houston's going to lose this game or they're in trouble. But still, Dayton, there's more to that Dayton team than I realized. Joe, I know you had a couple of notes. You wanted to maybe mention St. John's. You were actually more tuned into the St. John's Dayton matchup than I was. It was on during the day. You got to see Joel Soriano go up against Deron Holmes. You had a lot of fun. I've been trying to tell you about Deron for a while now, but what you watched that game a little closer than I did. I know you maybe want to touch on St. John's in general as well.
I'm not really big on St. John's. It seems like I think Pitino's right. A lot of the guys are trying to play individual basketball, not play as a team. Very pumped about Joel Soriano. I think he can be a good player for them moving forward, but they have a lot of work to do. And again, if you have a legend like Pitino coaching, you think maybe they figure it out at some point, but not there yet. We'll say, I watched most of these games. I think I watched all of Dayton's games in this tournament. Deron Holmes, very impressed. I mean, obviously being able to watch him the last couple of years, he's a very good player. I'm very impressed with his rebounding and body control. Overall, I think that's something that will translate to maybe the next level. I also was impressed with Santos, as you said, not just like shooting, but driving to the basket too. He showed like a little multifaceted game there. Kobe Elvis played well for Dayton, so I was impressed with those guys. And then the other two guys I got to touch on here for this tournament that I was impressed with, Houston, Jamal Shedd was just always settling the team down. He was always running the offense well. I think he has some very high IQ, one of the highest IQ players in the country. Looks like his three-point shot is maybe a little bit improved. If he does improve that, that's great. Because then you've got him and LJ Cryer working in that backcourt together. They've got some guys up in the front court too, that I think could be pretty good. So that team could be dangerous. I know we're talking Big 12. Maybe they move. Maybe they take a step back. That could be tough. And then Brandon Carlson, the forward for Utah, really can stretch the floor, can play in the post, can really make this team pretty versatile. They got a lot of returners. He wasn't the high scorer in their semifinal game. They had, what was his name? I think Gabe Madsen hit like 7 threes or something like that, and he was on fire. But Brandon Carlson's a name to remember. If they are able to put something together in the Pac-12, I know that was, you highlighted Wake Forest, I highlighted Utah before last week, and I just more and more impressed with him the more I see him. I think this is a team that could end up sneaking their way into the tournament. Always hard as a mid-level Pac-12 team, but I think they might be able to do it.
Joe, the only other thing I want to, I know we kind of already went through it, but Houston's rebounding. I'm trying to pull up the stats right now. I know there was a point where they were doubling up Dayton on rebounding, and they had, I want to say it was 7 or 8 offensive rebounds
Mm-hmm.
to, I believe, 0. That with between Juwan Roberts and Javi, and I I don't know. I've heard anyone say his first name. I don't know. I'm assuming it's Javier Francis. That team, there were times where they would get not third chances, fourth chances. It was unbelievable. I don't think I've ever seen a more dominant that I can recall in the last couple of years. I don't know that I've ever seen a more dominant rebounding performance than I did. Here, I got the final stats, which obviously may be skewed because there was a little bit of garbage time, but yeah, final rebounding totals 38-28, not as dominant as it sounds, but 13 offensive rebounds to 5. I mean, it was that on top of the what I saw defensively was every time Dayton ran some high pick and roll, it seemed like they rotated and recovered seamlessly. Like they just have a defensive presence. I see why this team, not that it's, I see why this team is one in defense on Ken, or they at least said, I'm assuming they didn't drop after last night's game. So they were one in defense on Ken Palm.
Mm-hmm.
I saw it visually because it just looked effortless. And it wasn't one thing that I could point to that I would say, okay, well, they're doing this type of coverage on it. It just looked effortless. And I was so impressed with that team. I know obviously they're going to face a lot tougher competition than Dayton this year, but again, they can only play and they end up playing in the tournament. And boy, did they play well.
That was actually one of my notes as well, so I'm glad you brought that up. But I also thought about the flip side. A lot of times I see Daron Holmes boxing out, and he's taking care of one of the big guys, right? And he's not able to go after the ball all the time. Dayton needs to crash the boards harder, man. They gave up way too many fourth and fifth chances. It was awful. I think that's something they'll figure out. Obviously, they have players stepping into different roles this year with transfers and everything, and obviously Malachi Smith going down. I mean, yes, it's a guard, but still, everyone has to chip in on the defensive glass at a certain point. And he can, Holmes can box out, he can rebound and everything, but when he's boxing out some of these guys, they're playing against pretty good teams with good rebounders. You need someone else to crash the glass. Otherwise, that could be the thing. I came away, I know you'll be happy with this, as saying Dayton is a tournament team this year, but if they aren't a tournament team, it might be because of that. And that's just something that people won't talk about on these other podcasts or like national TV coverage, but something I noticed of like that could really come back to bite them, especially. There's some tough teams it's not the A10 of old, but it's some tough teams in the A10 who will attack the glass very tough.
There's only, I know we've said that I've only want to make one other point, but the last point brought to you by my brother-in-law, Cameron Dickens. There was a point in the game where Dayton had 4 points from their guards, and it was late in the second half. So looking at the box score, they finished with, from their front court, a total of 10 points of their 55. That is a problem. Kobe Elvis, I don't know what's going on with him. He is having a rough start to the year, and that is a guy they need huge production from. Enoch Cheeks, transfer from Robert Morris, saw him in the Ohio State scrimmage. He was letting them fly, and they were just absolutely going in. I don't know what's going on with him. He's not been good either. Obviously, I talked about Bennett. He didn't have the scoring numbers in this game against Houston, but he's been playing better than I thought. But their guards are going to have to produce more than this. You can't have a game. We talked about it, Joe. Guards, they're what win you games in March, and normally I'd be very confident in Kobe Elvis going out and getting me efficiently 15, 20 points in a game, but they weren't there. And we can credit some of that to the Houston defense, but still, it was egregious. It was awful. So that's something they're going to have to work on now. Luckily, they're not going to have to play in the A10. They're not going to have to play teams like Houston every night. I haven't looked at their non-con schedule to see what else. I know they got a game. We're going to a game. They're playing in Cincinnati. They're playing UC, University of Cincinnati. Then it's not an on-campus game. It's at formerly U.S. Bank Arena, now Heritage Bank. We have tickets to that game. So they have some competition. I don't know what the rest of their non-con schedule looks like. Won't waste anybody's time looking at it right now, but they got some things to figure out. But there's still more hope than I thought there was. I buried them when Malachi got hurt. So there's a little more hope than I thought there was.
That's a good point. Yeah, I was impressed with Elvis early in the tournament. Late in the tournament, you're right. That was a rough game. But as you mentioned, Houston, historically, the last several years, and in KenPom this year, very good defensive team. So if that's, the measurement for Dayton should not be beating teams like Houston. It should be trying to make the tournament every year, trying to beat A10 teams. And if you get to the tournament, yes, go all out and try to win the games. But that's the measuring stick. You don't want to use Houston as the measuring stick if you're a Dayton team. Next tournament, we have to talk about the Continental Tire main event. Now, this had Washington, St. Mary's, San Diego State, and Xavier. The final ended up being San Diego State and Washington, as Xavier lost to Washington and St. Mary's lost to San Diego State. San Diego State is able to win the tournament. It was closer than maybe we thought when they got matched up with Washington. They did have a game against St. Mary's where they won in the first round by a bigger margin, but it went to overtime, and I think Washington was able to prove they have more ball handlers, more creators, and San Diego State, I came away really impressed with Jaden Ledee. I thought he was really good. I thought Trammell was really good, Lamont Butler, and it makes me kind of wonder, what if Keyshawn Johnson just stayed at San Diego State? They made the national championship game with them, and I know NIL money talks, but that's just something I took away. This is a very good team. I know they lost to BYU earlier this year already, but I think they'll get it on track and be a very, very good team again this year.
Joe, just real quick, I can you cover for 2 seconds while I go grab my? I thought it was plugged in, but I have 2 screens. I have the HDMI plugged in. I did not plug my charger in like an idiot. I know where it is. It'll take me 2 seconds to grab it.
Yeah,
so this is once again wonderful podcasting. Why don't you go ahead and talk about? I don't have anything to add except St. Mary's. I have to get off the train until they prove me otherwise. Why don't you go ahead and fill everybody in on the Empire Classic, which is finishing tonight, and I will be watching the game that's upcoming.
Yeah, I'll go ahead. I will finish everything here. Continental Tire main event. Washington was very impressed with plenty of playmakers, plenty of shooters. I think Moses Wood is one of the best shooters I think I've seen it, at least in a short, very, very short time period at Washington. St. Mary's has to prove it, like Greg said. San Diego State, pretty good. Xavier, better than expected. They have some freshmen who are stepping up, and they have some transfers who are doing okay. Maybe went from a team I didn't know if they'd make the tournament to maybe they could make the tournament and squeak in there. Empire Classic, we have some big name teams, but kind of a different level here. So we had UConn beating Indiana 77-57. It was absolute demolition. This UConn team is good. They seem hungry to prove that they can win with all the guys who left, believing the program. They seem like they're ready to go and prove for themselves that this team can do well this season as well. Indiana seems like they have some issues going forward, and one of those teams that were formerly great and a good program but need to figure things out. Now, Texas was able to beat Louisville on a buzzer beater by Max Asmus. Louisville, probably the best game played under Kenny Payne over the last couple of years. So we have a final of Texas and UConn that is going to go on later today. Greg, now that you are back, do you care to pick?
Yeah, I agree with everything you just said.
Yep.
Absolutely. That game, I believe, is a 7:00 game, so I think it is just about to tip if it hasn't already tipped.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm sticking with my original pick, Texas. When we went through last week and talked about this was one of the MTs I think we brought up. I picked Texas, so I'm going to stick with that. I think at the time, when did the Stephon Castle news come out that he was injured? I'm trying to think of what made me pick Texas over UConn.
He was injured last week, but now it seems like Hurley was saying he's not going to miss a lot of time, and now this week he might miss some time. So I think we were like, he might miss these games, but no, yeah, I think it was kind of unknown.
Right. Well, I think maybe it's just not to try and repeat anything that you just talked about. To me, that Louisville result was a little unexpected. UConn handled Indiana, but I'm not one of those where I'm going to go back on my word type. I picked Texas, so just going to stick with it. If you gave me the opportunity to switch right now, I might.
You have the opportunity. You can switch it.
No, I said Texas.
Okay.
I'm sticking with it.
All right, so Greg has to pick his preseason national champion to win it all when it comes to March, even if they don't make the tournament. And you heard it here first. So when we're in these big money brackets together, that just has to happen. I will say UConn. Now I was a Texas guy before. Uh, Concerning the way they played against Louisville, it was not that clean of a game. And I'm impressed more and more with UConn. I said it was going to take a lot for them to repeat as champions. I still think that's true. But in this group of teams where, obviously Indiana and Louisville aren't going to go too far this year, and Texas has some issues they're trying to get worked out early, I'll say UConn, with a lot of their guys stepping up, I think it's been impressive to me. So I'll go UConn in this Empire Classic title game. There were a couple other notable results to go over. We already talked about Villanova and Penn. UC Irvine beat USC. Now, this wasn't exactly what you would imagine. They still shouldn't have lost the game, but USC was down 2 key players in this one, Greg, and you just sometimes you can't overcome that when you have a thin roster due to health issues and just honestly a thin roster overall.
So, as you already mentioned, no Boogie Ellis, no Kobe Johnson. So they were working short, and I've actually been hearing some murmurs about this. And of course, we don't even have to say it at this point. No Bronny James, but I mean that's a given. I've been hearing some words about this UC Irvine team, Irvine. We can play the pronunciation game again if you want. I've always said Irvin. I don't know how Californians would say it. Joe, this is just off the top of your head. Obviously, there's some preseason bias in it, and you have the benefit of knowing they beat USC. What do you think that UC Irvine's Ken Palm rating is? I'm looking at it right now, like this very second, 706 on November 20th. What would you guess that it is?
See, I haven't really checked out Ken Palm because I don't believe in it very early in the season, but I will say UC Irvine is 69th.
They're 78th. That's a better guess than I would. I thought you would have guessed in the 150s or something, which is honestly for a small conference team like this, it's probably what I would have guessed. But you want to guess who's 2 spots above UC Irvine in Ken Palm right now?
I do not. No.
No, you don't want to guess. St. Mary's,
okay.
And right above them is Yale. So teams we've talked about.
For better or for worse, yeah.
Again, but still, teams we've talked about as maybe possibly making some noise. You like Yale, I like St. Mary's. They're not in places we thought they'd be right now. But just to say, I this week listening to some other podcasts and other analysts, it sounds like maybe this Irvine team might have a little. I mean, the mascot's the Anteaters. I don't know what there is not to love about that. One of our favorite D1 mascots, one of the most unique. That this loss might be explainable. The thing that got me is it looks like they also struggled, and we can't watch because we don't have Pac-12 Network. It looks like a few days later, with Boogie in the lineup, they also struggled against Brown.
Mm-hmm.
That's what starts to give me concern. When you string together a couple of games where you struggle, when you have the number 1 recruit in the country who in the game we both watched him in looked fantastic, we both walked away from that Kansas State game saying this is a good team. Mm-hmm. Maybe we need to reevaluate. Now, neither of us were saying, this is a top 15 team or anything like that, but I was starting to get excited about that team, and maybe they're going to have a few more growing pains or struggles than we originally thought.
Yeah, they were a team that a lot of people had them higher than their preseason rankings, and I think I had them like 21 or 22. I just didn't get it, especially knowing the Bronny James situation, and that does matter depth-wise. This is a guy that was ranked, even in top 10 for NBA draft prospects for next year by ESPN, I believe. I was perplexed, but after seeing them in their first game, I kind of was like, yeah, they kind of seem good. Collier's, everything is advertised, and maybe even more, and Boogie Ellis and him are working well together, and we can't watch the game, so we don't know what's going on because Pac-12 Network stinks, but the only good thing coming of the Pac-12 conference dying is just that.
Absolutely.
But, yeah, I think we need to see more proof from Andy Enfield. I think we need to, as a coach, I think we're figuring out how this is going to work with all these players. I think we need to see, everyone healthy and need to see them working better together, and we'll see what happens here. We got plenty of time for them to figure it out, but it does not look encouraging for USC thus far. The last one we have to go over before we get to picks for some of these non-conference games and then events we have coming up this week. We had Bryant beating FAU. Now, might remember Bryant. They've been a team who have been in the play-in games a lot. They've been a conference tournament champion in the NEC, I believe, is what they were in. I believe they maybe moved. I don't know what conference they're in now.
They're in the American East now, I believe.
Yeah, American East.
I'm almost positive it's the American East.
And then they beat FAU. And Greg, this is a bad loss for FAU. This is a team that lost 3 games last season, went to the Final Four. I guess got their 4th loss, once they got there. But it's not a loss you want to have to a team that would probably be a 16 seed if they made the tournament. And on top of it all, I guess we got to say that the overwhelming point that I sent you today, the new AP poll came out, and there are voters who just clearly, you don't even have to watch the games, but if you have a team who is ranked 10th who loses to Bryant, you need to drop them in the rankings. That's just how it works. So I understand you can't watch every game, even if you're the most dedicated fan ever. It's just impossible.
Right.
But
there's not enough time in the day. You're right.
But people need to start taking this more seriously. And if not, give us your votes. We will do the AP Top 25. I will take the criticism for ranking teams too highly and too lowly, and maybe just throw in Youngstown State Penguins team in there just because. I'll take that criticism. But don't just rank teams just because, oh, FAU is good, and like you obviously didn't know what was going on. That bugs me.
Joe, just for reference, Bryant currently 2-3. Their other win is against Fisher. So their only win over a Division I school is FAU at the moment. Not a loss that you want on your resume. Everybody gets one. We talked about it with Michigan State. Everybody gets one. I mean, it's early season basketball. This is going to happen, but this one sticks out for a team that was already going to kind of be facing that scrutiny and criticism of having that mid-major tag and not being one of the traditional schools, and maybe they just got hot late, and then, they almost lost to Memphis anyway, so none of this would have happened. This is still a team that had over 30 wins last year. This is an odd loss. It's weird. It doesn't make sense. Even Bryant's roster, I mean, sometimes you look in here and you see, maybe they had some guy. Earl Timberlake is the only name I recognize. I mean, sometimes with these.
No, you don't.
No, it's not. No, you're right. No, I don't.
But so March Madness hero for St. Peter's a couple years ago, Doug Eddard, but he scores 4.2 points per game, showing that he may have just been a couple game miracle. But yeah, go ahead. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
I forgot. No, you're right. We got to mention Doug Eddard too. But sometimes there's things in here you can look at and say, well, okay, maybe this one's it's just weird. There's no explaining it. And we'll see, as more results come for them, it's just worth watching. Is there something going on there? They obviously returned basically everyone. So sometimes, I mean, we're still talking about, I want to say 18, 19-year-olds, but nowadays in college basketball, it's really not that. We're still not talking about professionals. These, given a large sample size, there's going to be some of these guys are going to have ups and downs, and kind of like we saw with some of the other results this week, if all of them have a down day in the same game, that's how you lose a game. There's only 5 players on the floor. If 4 of them are having a bad game, that's how these things happen. But still, this is one that it smarts, it hurts. Definitely going to be looked at come tournament time in terms of where they end up getting seated and whatnot.
Absolutely. I think one thing to note here, too, I think Dusty May might be happy with this loss. Like, you never want to lose, but they had all this built up. They went to the Barstool Invitational, got some hype around them because it's just a different type of event, and Barstool obviously has its own draw. And then they come home. They win their first game at home, I believe, behind like a raucous crowd. And then they lose this one. Gives them a chance to refocus and to bear down. They clearly have the talent. As you said, everyone returns. But you can't lose games like this. And I do think we're seeing more teams lose games that are maybe inexcusable than before. I think, obviously 3-point line, transfer portal, we're just seeing different teams give different looks. We already have just a portion of our document here, Greg, that has notable results each week where we talk about upsets. And we've seen Michigan State lose to James Madison last week and everything. We're starting to get into like the thick of that. So it's going to happen.
we didn't even mention UNC Greensboro. That's one I
Yeah.
meant to put on here. UNC Greensboro and Arkansas. But if you kind of look at a lot of the composition of look at the teams we're talking about, there's not like there's 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 not a rhyme or reason. We're talking about FAU. They brought everybody back. Okay. Villanova, they're full of transfers. Arkansas, they're full of transfers. There's not anything that you can pick out and say these types of teams are losing. I don't know what it is. You got an explanation for why we're seeing some of these? Because to me, and maybe it's just anecdotal, but it feels like we're seeing more of this stuff. Obviously, we remember the year Stephen F. Austin beat Duke, and that was just like, this is strange.
Mm-hmm.
But to me, it feels like we're seeing more of these oddity type results than we would in a normal year.
I think we are too. Unfortunately, I don't think we're going to see many this week because we just have so many events where it's not possible. But I would say we're seeing 16 seeds beat one. Last year, even the last couple years, it's just the game is getting more focused on skill and shooters rather than pure athleticism. And I think it's something that even John Calipari's had to deal with, obviously. And now they have more shooters, so it makes the sport more interesting. It makes it sure that anything can happen. We still need to see a Cinderella run by maybe a seed that's like 6 or higher or lower, however you want to phrase it, win a tournament before we can really say like basketball's turned on its head. But we see these upsets, which obviously makes it more watchable. And as you said, that's why we're doing the podcast. This is a fun sport because of the upsets, because March, anything can happen. It's just a fun time. All right, so we have to go to our picks for the week. We don't have too many games picked. We're going to kind of go over, I think, one picked game, and then we'll have a couple events we're going to go over. The picked game we're going to do is the Thanksgiving Day. We have Michigan State and Arizona. This one is in California. Two teams that have suffered, two teams that have had some big games to start the year. Michigan State has suffered some losses. Arizona obviously impressed against Duke.
Yeah, I think there's not really a reason to elaborate, spend 10 minutes on this. I'm picking Arizona. I think we've already spent quite a bit of time talking about Champions Classic, what we see in Michigan State. Hopefully, they try and get things right and whatnot, but in terms of picking the game, there's nothing I've seen here. I'm not saying Michigan State can't win the game, but there's nothing we've talked about from the last 2 weeks that tells me, well, they're going to win this game or anything like that. I don't really have a rhyme or like get into specifics or whatever. I just don't like what I'm seeing from Michigan State right now. Joe, who you taking?
I'm taking Arizona too. I mean, I think this could be a game that goes Michigan State's favor if they just do figure things out. But I'm with you. I don't see a lot of it, and I like so many of the different things Arizona can do to you. You can play. Hey, if you need a bucket, go give Caleb Love the ISO ball. Kylan Boswell has I think 17 of 22 on threes this year already, and he's the point guard and he's playing really good basketball. We talked about him a lot last week. Pele Larson has done a very good job. I think, in the opposite, he doesn't want to shoot as much as Caleb Love does. I think that'll kind of shift maybe throughout the year. Ballo inside is really good, and they obviously have, the good backup in Krivas, who, I don't get why Jay Billis said he was skilled, something we talked about last week, but seems like he could be a good backup.
Jay Billis is not the only one I've heard say he's skilled. I don't know if we want to mention names, but I keep hearing people say this dude is skilled. Like, he's a good player, but like, I do not see the skill. Like, right. He might be a high IQ player and know where he needs to be when and be in good position for rebounds and take good shots. But if you're telling me pick two dudes to play one-on-one, two post players, he's not one of the first 50 guys I'd pick right now. Unless you're going to have him post up against someone he's got a significant height advantage over, but I wouldn't, just look at the other big guys. Look at your Hunter Dickinson, your Kyle Filipowski, guys that aren't even necessarily extremely defensively talented. Like, I wouldn't pick him over them. And again, nobody's saying that, but I don't get where this he's skilled conversation is coming from. That's one that I kept hearing this week, and I know I said it to you in a text. I said, I don't get what it is with this guy, but I guess, Joe, maybe we should just close the podcast and go home because we don't know what we're talking about.
Maybe I think people sometimes confuse skilled with good. You can still be good and not be skilled. You could be both. You could be skilled and good. You could obviously LeBron James later in his career had the athleticism, had the shooting, had the passing, he had everything. But like it's not like the same thing. I think he's a good good backup. I think he can be productive. I think they can throw tons of 7-footers at you. That's kind of my point though. Like they have different players. He's not as skilled as other big guys on the roster, as other big guys in the country, but he gives you a different look, and I kind of like that. So I'm going to go Arizona again. I'm decently high on this team moving forward. It was not early in the season, or I should say preseason, but I do think they could be a very good team down the stretch. And now to some of the tournaments we have to pick. We're going to start with the Maui Invitational. Now, this already started. We mentioned that the Purdue-Gonzaga game is going on right now. Here are the list of teams in this event. We have Chaminade. Obviously, it's in Hawaii. This time not being played in Lahaina Civic Center. It is going to be at Hawaii's University of Hawaii's event because of all the fires that went on in Hawaii. Chaminade, Gonzaga, sorry, I can't get Gonzaga. People get really mad if you do that. Gonzaga, Kansas, Marquette, Purdue, Syracuse, Tennessee, and UCLA. So far, we have Greg. You'll have to update me on the Purdue game, but we have Tennessee beating Syracuse in the first game of the tournament in an absolutely loaded Maui Invitational.
Yeah, this is absolutely stacked, and I know Maui is usually stacked with a lot of good teams, but this even more than ever. I think some of these teams are maybe better than they were projected to be when, especially like given where Tennessee is right now when they originally were in this field. This field was put together last year at some point. Of course, we would expect Kansas to be Kansas, Gonzaga to be Gonzaga. I don't know that anybody knew that all these players were going to come back for Marquette. So this is a stuffed field, and I think it's important to know. I missed. Did you already say who you were taking yet, or did you just list the? Okay, I'm going to take Purdue. And for the sake of making sure we're transparent, Joe and I picked these this afternoon, so. If I believe I remember who I saw you pick as your champion. That's why it wasn't that I wasn't listening to you. It was I couldn't remember if you said it or if it was just what I saw on the sheet. But so both of our champions have already played, but we absolutely did pick them for this game. What I was worried about is we were going to be mid podcast and I was going to have to say, well, my champion of Maui is out. But luckily, looks like 73-63 final. Purdue over Gonzaga. So, of course, both of our champions are still in. I won't reveal. I'll let Joe reveal his result. But I just to give, of course, anything can happen in this tournament. Zach Edey, I look up and down this field and just try and visualize what these other teams are going to throw at him. And then the fact that those two guards I love, and they've got a few other pieces. That to me, I like that team is complete, and I could see there's. Well, I'll tell you what. I was going to go more into detail, but I want you to get into your champion because I think that will give us some other points to talk about. Joe, who are you picking?
That's cool. I'll give you my champion, and I'll give you some segues to talk about after that. We have Tennessee for me. Mentioned about how high I am on them just after the preseason, and just overall, I'm just a really big fan of Rick Barnes and what he does. I know he gets a lot of hate because of the tournament stuff, but he's done a lot of work for Tennessee that they haven't really done in the past, other than maybe Bruce Pearl in the last 40 years, maybe? I don't know. I have to go farther than that. But Zakai Ziegler is slowly making his way back. He's playing more and more minutes every night. I'm excited to see, can he do that with 3 games in 3 days? Can he keep on playing and giving productive minutes? They've hit the transfer portal. They have Dalton Connect, who had some pretty good moments today against Syracuse, hit some catch and shoot threes. Vescovi's there for the 700th year, it seems like. Josiah Jordan-James as well. They've got experience. They've always played defense. Now they have the offensive punch in that Syracuse game. I did come away impressed with Syracuse, by the way, just to kind of throw that out there. They were not projected to be this good, but they played well. But Tennessee, I'm still very confident in this field where, and Greg, here's the segue part. We have Tennessee, who has a backcourt where I know I'm getting something out of, other than the Zakai Ziegler injury part. We have other backcourts where we don't know that's going to happen. So we have, Purdue, we just said it. We want to see them play in a high leverage situation. Maybe they did today. We have to go back and watch that. With their guards to have to play in a high leverage situation. We have Gonzaga, who has depth issues, specifically at guard, and that could come back to bite them, although it does seem like they're figuring things out slowly but surely. We have Kansas. We already talked about Marco Jackson. And Timberlake maybe start stepping up for them. Marquette has a good backcourt, too. We'll have to see how they do in tournament play. But those are just kind of some of my thoughts on some of the other teams in the event, Greg. If you want to elaborate on any of those, you go right ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I think we kind of already talked about some of these things, but obviously these teams are playing again. So I get a little worried about Kansas in terms of production. And it's funny, they're AP voters are creatures of habit, so they're still the number one ranked team in the country. I don't think they're the best team in the country right now, but that's where the AP voters put them to start the year, and they ain't going to move them down until they lose a game. So Marquette was the other team I toyed with picking. I, of course, looked at Tennessee. I just worry about those teams. What are they going to throw at Zach Edey? UCLA is kind of the X factor for me here. I don't know what they are yet. I'm not sure anybody's really seen them play a lot. They've probably played 3 games on Pac-12 Network anyway, so can't really watch them even if you wanted to. One important note on Tennessee, looks like that defense is there, held Syracuse to 56, and I think that was kind of the thing we said is this team can score. They kind of had some results earlier in the year where they weren't defending as well. And I know you said you were impressed with Syracuse, but it looks like they've kind of got it working on both sides of the ball. They put up 73 points, and that was with only 2 points from Gainey. So they've got a lot of working pieces. I think Dalton Connect is going to be your centerpiece. I think Zakai Ziegler is going to be your leader once he's back full and healthy and playing his full minutes. Josiah Jordan-James, the ageless wonder, Vescovi, can't even figure out how to pronounce his name. There's a lot. I can absolutely see Tennessee winning this tournament. Joe, how do you imagine? Let's imagine a Purdue Tennessee matchup. I mean, how does anybody approach Zach Edey? But how would you imagine they approach that? I know you've kind of talked to me about how you attack that, but just for our listeners, if you're Rick Barnes, how would you approach playing against Zach Edey?
How teams should approach is a lot of help and make them pass out and make some of these guys hit big shots that we talked about. Some of these guards did not hit the big shots last year, and that's why they lost with 16. You got to make sure they can prove it. With Tennessee, though, the physical nature of things, last year they got kind of like probably the toughest team in college basketball. I mean, the Duke Tennessee game last year was a lot of I don't would say blood, but like a lot of physicality. So they're probably just going to beat him up. And honestly, with Zach Edey, they made the point on the broadcast today. Like he gets fouled more than gets called. So if you do that and you can force him into bad shots, I think he started 4 of 11 in the game today. If you can do that, that opens up a way for you to win. You're gonna have to hit some threes and draw them outside of the lane too. Make them draw fouls. Guarding outside of the lane, and they can do that. Tennessee has the capability to do that, so that's what I think might happen. But yeah, 2 very good teams. I mean, we obviously have again 4 or 5 really, really good teams in this, and then some X Factor teams and Chaminade, who we love. But just once in a lifetime.
Just for record, all of those ins and outs, I agree with you. I've heard you say all those things to me before, but they do actually have a big body, not as big as Zach Edey. Jonas Adu, 6'11", 240. So it's not like they don't have a single person that they could throw at Edey to guard him individually. But I do agree with you. You're gonna even with him on there, you're gonna have to bring help. But still, probably one of the bigger guys in terms of both height and weight that Edey's going to face throughout the year. So they do have an individual, probably not going to play, a ton. Of guys like that throughout the year, but they do have an individual that can somewhat at least play with them.
Definitely. So that's Maui Invitational, one of the more fun events every year. The other one that has kind of joined Feast Week in terms of like the best events, we have Battle for Atlantis. We have Arkansas, Michigan, Memphis, North Carolina, Stanford, Texas Tech, Northern Iowa, and Villanova. Greg, you had an interesting champion in my mind.
I am picking Villanova. I think some of these MTEs tend to have some wild results. I am going to pick them purely based on riding that wave of that phenomenal performance against Maryland. Um, the other teams that I would have looked at, the second team for me, I probably would have picked is Carolina, and after them, probably Arkansas. I don't necessarily favor one of those teams over the other, but if you made me pick 1, 2, and 3, it would probably be in that order. Um, just don't we haven't seen a lot of these teams play a lot of games yet. Other teams of interest, you got if just to list off all teams, we got Arkansas, Michigan, Memphis, North Carolina, Stanford, Texas Tech, Northern Iowa, and Villanova. There's a lot to work with here. I feel like there's been more loaded battle for Atlantis, but I think some of this might be Michigan isn't what we might have thought they were, a year or so ago. Villanova isn't quite what we thought they were. Texas Tech, of course, went through the whole thing with losing their coach, and that completely changed the dynamic of their team. So this is maybe has the kind of the opposite effect of the field that Maui has. But it's one of those things where I've maybe recency bias. I just saw Villanova play. I just saw them play well. There's two other teams that I would absolutely, which I believe you picked one of those two, that I could absolutely see winning this. So, Joe, what are you thinking?
Yeah, I didn't mean to go SEC heavy, but I went Arkansas here. I think they lost that game to UNC Greensboro, but we're going into a point where they are going to be playing in these tournaments where you have multiple games in multiple days, having depth. We had so many transfers from Arkansas. We don't even know what the rotation. We didn't know what the rotation was going to look like coming into this year. We really didn't. That's not going to be a bad thing in this environment. There's going to be guys that have good games, guys that have bad games. Different minutes will be played. I think they have the size, but they also have the guard play. I'm high on them still, even after the UNC Greensboro loss. And honestly, it's a field of there's no elite teams, but a lot of good teams. Other teams, I'm excited to see what Michigan can do because Doug McDaniel had a very good game against St. John's. We didn't recap that game, but it was obviously a lot of hype because Rick Pitino, but he had a very good game. I'm excited to see what they can do and step forward. North Carolina might be the other team that maybe consider here for me. I don't think I'm not a Villanova guy this year, Greg, as you know, but I appreciate you picking it because weird stuff does happen. But North Carolina is another team I consider too. All right, we have the ESPN Events Invitational. Boise State, Butler, FAU, Iowa State, Penn State, Texas A&M, VCU, and Virginia Tech. Who are you going with?
Joe, I'm picking Texas A&M. I don't think there's a ton to get into in terms of the weeds with this one. There's just a few teams, to watch maybe in terms of storylines. We got FAU in the field. That's one of the reasons we definitely wanted to talk about this. I don't have in front of me who their first matchup is, but that team loses their first game. You get ready to hear some cries. Boise State is a team I had on my radar. Tyson Degenhart, Leon Rice's son, is also still on that team. Team to watch out for, maybe ends up being a 10, 11 seed if they get into the tournament. I'm not saying they're absolutely a tournament team, but if they get into the tournament, probably in that, about playing game, give or take, somewhere in that. We got Iowa State, TJ Osselberger. Every year it feels like we bring in 8 new guys. You never know what they're going to be. Penn State, first year under their new coach, and actually VCU is also in the field. So there's a lot going on here, and I think we both would agree. I don't want to again give your answer. There's one team that stands out above, but there's still a lot going on here.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. I think Texas A&M wins, and I think they are the team that stands above, and it's not something you would really typically say, especially FAU. But they lost that game. That's what happens. But there's a lot of decent teams in this event. I will say I'm excited for the storylines, too. You mentioned some of the other ones, but I'll say we have Buzz Williams against his former team. We have Mike Rhodes at Penn State against VCU, his former team. It's going to be fun weekend here, fun week of basketball. I just am very high on Texas A&M this year. Wade Taylor, Tyrese Radford, Henry Coleman. They got plenty of guys to just keep on going through. It's going to be fun, but I think they're going to be a good team, and I like to lean on that guard play early. And with Radford and Taylor, I think they're really set up well. So those are our picks for the week. Any final thoughts, Greg?
This is just like one of the better weeks of the year. Obviously, we love opening tournament weekend. There's a lot of other parts of the college basketball season, but this is when things start to feel real. And it is odd because we've already had 10 days of action, 10 plus days of action, but you don't get these loaded days like you do, especially daytime basketball. We love daytime basketball. So it's going to be a lot of fun. Going to get to see some high level games, see some interesting results. There's going to be somebody that gets upset. Well, there's going to be a lot to talk about next week.
Absolutely excited to watch all the basketball this week. My time to remind everyone to like and subscribe on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts. Next week we'll be back to recap Feast Week and to preview the next week of games, which would be the last week of November. For now, thanks for watching. We'll see you guys next time.